begin. Okay, with the Eibishter's help, we're going to begin the seventh parak in Masechta Bava Basra. Today's daf is Masechta Bava Basra, daf Kif Gimel, and we're starting from Kuf Beis Amid Beis by the Mishnah. I'll make it bigger. Look at the Heilige Mishnah. Okay, here we go. The Heilige Mishnah says like this. Here we're talking about again the honesty of business. It's amazing. It should be learned before you go to business. You have to learn Masechta Bava Basra. So, a guy says to his friend, Beis kur offer ani moicha lecha. I'm selling you a piece of land, and he says the word offer, of dirt, a piece of land that you can plant 30 saw of wheat, let's say. That's approximately 273 amas by 273 amas. I'm selling you this piece of land. And so understood is that the land has to be capable of growing growing produce. It has to be a land that you can, plant there. The problem is, you go look at the field that the guy sold you, and you see Hayasham, in there you see Nekoyim Amukim, deep crevices, Asara Tvachim, deep 10 Tvachim, wide 4 Tvachim. So there are places where you can't technically plant there. I mean, or it's difficult to get a plow there. Or let's say you find just a rock. In the middle of the field, you find a rock, Gevoyin Ayit Tvachim, that's high 10 Tvachim, a 10 Tefach high rock, which is wide 4 Tefach. So then, Ein Nimnodim Ima. It's not counted as part of the sale. That means the guy that sold you the field has to give you extra field, extra land to make up for the rock that he gave you that's in the middle of this field, or for the crevice that's in the middle of this field, because that's not counted as part of the 30 saw. You bought 30 saw, a piece of land that you can plant in that land 30 saw. But if it has this piece of part of it that you can't plant there, it's not counted as part of the land. Pachas mekam, but if it's smaller than that, let's say you have a rock that's only 5 tefach high, or a crevice that's not deep 10 tefachim, it's only deep, 7 tefachim. So it's a small crevice. It's counted as part of the land, and the seller does not have to give you extra land because of it. It's part of the 30 saw, even though you're not going to plant the whole property because there are crevices there. That's fine. It's counted as part of the sale. Vim amalai, but if the seller said, Kibes kur offer, I'm selling you approximately a kur of offer. So here, it's understood from the language of the seller, even though it's not written in a document, but he said it, Kibes kar. Even if he had a crevice that's deeper than 10 tefach, or a stein that's higher than 10 tefachim, the Mishnah says that's included in the sale, because he didn't say, I'm giving you exactly a land which you could plant 30 saw of tvu in there. I'm giving you something that approximately you could plant like there, 30 saw. But obviously, it's possible it could be less, because you have places on that property that he's selling you where you can't plant there. There's a rock there, or it's too deep in the ground. So therefore, but since he said kibes kur offer, like approximately of a base kur offer, then it's counted as part of this sale. Zog the Gemara. Tanan Harsam, we learned in the Mishnah. Hamagdish Shadeu b'shas yovel. A man inherited a piece of land from his father. Okay, he inherited land from your father, and you make it hegdish during the first year of yovel. So what does the Chumash say? That if you want to redeem that hegdish, that you made it hegdish to the base of Migdash, if you want to redeem it and get the land back, if it's a type of land that you could plant there, a choimer of so'irim. A choimer is like a kur of so'irim, 30 saw of so'irim, of barley. Then all you have to do is give Kegdish 50 shekel kesef. Maybe the land is worth 100 shekel, but the Chumash says that it's called Erechin. that if you, the Chumash says on certain situations that no matter what the quality of the land is, there's a certain set price that if you want to buy it back from Bezdin, from the Hegdish, you have to pay that price that the Chumash states. And the Chumash says that if it's a land that you could plant barley and you could plant 30 saw barley, you pay 50 shekel to Hegdish and you get your land back. Says the Mishnah, and this Mishnah is Masechta Erechim, because this is what we're discussing over here. If you have a crevice that's deep 10 tefach, or a rock that's high 10 tefachim, so you made a hegdish, a piece of land, let's say, again, normal piece of land that you could plant is 273 by 273 amas. That's a piece of land that you can plant 30 saw. But let's say in the middle of the land, they had this deep part that's a crevice that's deep 10 tefach, or rock that's high 10 tefach, and again, it's wide 4 tefachim. We go to top of Kuf Gimel. Ein nimdadim ima. It's not counted in it. Therefore, it's not part of the field. And therefore, it doesn't get that set price of 50 shekel kasef. So let's say, so therefore, you're going to have to, what are you going to do with it? So it's hegdish. So if you want the crevice back, you're going to have to give the value of the crevice to hegdish. In other words, it'll have the market price for that part of the field if you want to redeem that part of the field back, because that's considered a separate field. Pachas mekam, if it's less than that, nimdadim ima, then it's part of the original field. If it's a small crevice, it's understood that when you sell a land or you magdish a land, that there's going to be crevices. Not every spot is worthy to plant there. So it's counted. So if it's less than 10 tefach, then it's counted as part of the hegdish, and therefore it's redeemed with the price of 50 shekel kesef. Says the Gemara, ba'amai ligdish ba'ampein nafshe. Why do we say that even if it's deep 10 tefach or high 10 tefach, it doesn't come under the halachas of Erechin of the set price of 50 shekel kesef. True, it's considered a separate field, but it's still something you inherited from your father, so it should be considered as an Erechin type of field, which you should be able to redeem according to the ratio of 50 shekel per 30 saw. Why do you go to the market price of that crevice and that rock? You're going to say, first of all, the Gemara says, Kivan the loy have a base kur loy kache, since it's not a base kur, it doesn't come under the Erechin type of calculation, because the calculation of Erechin is pretty specific in the Torah. Torah says that if your land can do a chomer sa'irim, 30 saw of sa'irim, then you pay 50 shekel. But the Torah doesn't tell you what happens if your land makes less or more. Do you ratio that price for another type of land? So do you want to say not so? Tanya, we learned in a brisa, soda matam loima. Why does it say the extra word soda? V'mishnas yovel yagdish sodehu. Of course, we know we're talking about a field. So what does that teach you? The word extra soda, field, it means no matter what size of the field is. Because the pasuk says if it's a field that could plant 30 saw of sa'irim, shekel kesef, then you pay 50 shekel. So ainly, I would have thought that if you magdish in that exact amount, then you get the 50 shekel kesef. How do I know? If you have a land that's smaller than 30 saw, let's say it makes only 15 saw, maybe it makes only 8 saw, or whatever it is, even if it's a small piece of land, but you inherited it from your father, how do you know that when you want to redeem it, you use the ratio of 50 shekel kesef for 30 saw? Talmud Loimer, soda b'chol makom. The Torah says soda, any type of field, no matter what size, you use that ratio of 50 shekel kesef for the 30 saw. So let's say if it's half the size of a 30 saw field, then you'll pay only 25 shekel. But the point is Why did the Mishnah say that if you have a crevice or a rock that's 10 tefachim high or 10 tefachim deep, it's considered a separate field, and you have to redeem it at market price? Why do I have to redeem it at market price? Even if you consider it as a separate field, at the end of the day, you made it hegdish, and therefore you should, and it's your father's field, right? You inherited. You should have the right to redeem it according to the calculation of 50 shekel kesef. Answers the Gemara, Amarav Ukva Bachama. Here we're talking about, that Mishnah is talking about B'nekoyim B'leim Mayim. It's a crevice full of water, askinim. The lav b'nei zriyaninu. You can't plant there. It's like that in the crevice, it's full of a pool of water, so you can't even plant there. And the Torah only says that the dinam of 50 shekel kesef apply only if it's the type of field that you inherited from your father, and plus you could potentially plant there. But if we're talking about a crevice, a hole in the ground that's full of water, you're not going to plant there. So there, in order to redeem it, you have to use the market price. I'll prove it to you. That's what we're talking about here, that the crevice in the ground is something that you can't plant there. The Tani, because the Mishnah says, Dumya desloim, it has to be similar to a rock. That's juxtaposed, a crevice in the ground or a rock. Shmamina, and a rock, you can't plant on a rock. Shmamina, it's proof that the crevice in the ground is a type of crevice in the ground that you cannot plant there. Says the Gemara, if that was true, if there's water in that crevice, so why is it considered part of the original field if it's smaller than 10 tefach? The Mishnah says that if it's smaller than 10 tefach, it's part of the original property. But why? You can't plant there, even if it's 5 tefach deep. But if it's full of water, you're not going to be able to plant in there. Answers the Gemara, Hani negara da'ara mikre, shidre da'ara mikre. It's called a bulge in the ground or a dent in the ground. It's really, it's looked at as, since it's such a small little puddle, so to speak, it's considered part of the original field, and it's not so noticeable. It's like a little, I don't know, a place where you can an incline, a small incline or decline in the ground, but it's not considered its own field. Only if it's the size of 10 tefach by 4 tefachim, that looks like a regular swimming pool, so to speak, in the field, then it's counted as a separate thing. So now the Gemara says like this: Hachamai, in our Mishnah, when someone sells a field and there was a crevice there, does that crevice, in order to be counted as a separate entity, does it have to be full of water? We just learned by Erechem that in order to be counted as something different, it's something different, that's market price. It's different, but in order to be counted as market price, it's full of water. So let's say, in our case, when a person sold a field, and the question over here is, you sold a field, and there's a crevice in the ground of 10 tefachim. In order for it not to be part of the original sale, would that crevice in the ground have to be full of water? Because maybe if it's not full of water, it could be considered part of the original field. Because if it's full of water, certainly it's not part of the field. But maybe if it's not full of water, it's also not considered part of the sale. Again, if it's not considered part of the sale, the seller has to make it up to the buyer by giving him a piece of land from somewhere else. So Omar Papa explained, our Mishnah is talking about even if the crevice in the ground is not full of water. And my time, why isn't it? I mean, a person bought a field. Technically, even if it has a crevice that's in deep 10 tefachim in the ground, you could plant in that place. So why isn't it counted as part of the original field? Why does the guy have to make up to you and give you extra field? Answers the Gemara, because the purchaser has a problem with that. A person doesn't want to pay for something that's one spot. He's buying one field, but when you look at it, it looks like 2-3 different fields because this crevices, deep crevices all over the place, large deep crevices all over the place. That's not what he paid for. He paid for one smooth field where he'll be able to get his plow all at once. And I guess in a crevice, it's hard to get your plow in there, even though it's possible, but it looks like another field. So therefore, if it's deep enough and noticeable enough, the seller has to make it up to the buyer by giving him land from somewhere else. It's not part of the sale. Maskef lo Ravina. So Ravina asked the question: how could you say it's full of water? It's not full of water, and it's still considered as part of a separate sale. The Mishnah juxtaposes the crevice in the ground to rocks. Masloim the labanes riyaninu. Just like a rock, it's something you can plant in. Afhani nami. So the crevice is also, in order for it to be considered separate, it has to be in a crevice, the labanes riyaninu, that you can't plant there. That means it's full of water. So the fact that the Mishnah juxtaposes these two examples, it must be that the crevice is a type of crevice you can't plant there. So it must be full of water. Not like Rav Papa said, that even if it's not full of water, it's not counted as part of the sale. And says the Gemara, when did we say that it's similar to rocks? Is only if it's less than that. In other words, if it's, let's say it's only 5 tefachim big, then we say that only if it's full of, then we say it's that, then we compare it to the rocks and say that just like rocks, if you can't plant there. But if it's smaller, let's say it's a 5 tefach rock, it's counted as part of the original field. So even the crevice, and even if it's full of water, but it's smaller than 10 tefach, it's only 5 tefach deep, it would be counted as part of the field. That's the chiddush, that even though you can't plant there, but since it's so small, it's counted as part of the original field. However, if it's very big, if it's 10 tefach big, deep, then even if you could plant there, it's still not counted as part of the original field because the guy wanted to buy one field, and now when you look at it, it looks like 3 different fields there, a few fields there, so it's not counted as part of the sale. Next part of the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. We said that if it's less than 10 tefachim deep in the ground, it's counted as part of the original field. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak said, Troshim she'amru beis arba kabim. Yes, we're allowed to have in a field, I sold the field, right? And it's 30 saw, you can plant there 30 saw, but there are little crevices all around. I got to make sure that when I add up all those crevices, that even though they're small, less than 10 tefachim deep, each one of them, but I got to make sure that between all of them, there are less than 4 kavim. You can't plant there 4 kavim. 4 kavim is a sizable amount of wheat. Let's say, but if it's something like bigger than that, right? And it's very difficult to plant or looks, so then if it's more than that, then it's not counted as part of the sale, even though it's less than 10 tefachim. See, maybe I'll let you get away with 1 crevice or 5 crevices, but you can't have 30 small different crevices, because if you add them all up, you're not going to be able to plant 4 kavim, which is 2%, a little bit more than 2% of a 30 saw field. So there, the purchaser is not moichel it, I guess. When a purchaser buys a 30 saw field, he understands maybe 0.5% or 1% he won't be able to plant on the field. But if you have all these little crevices in the field and more than 2.2%, you can't plant there, he's not moichel it. He wants his money back. Even if it's less than 4 kavim, but it has to be spread out in an area of 5 kavim. That means if it's in a small area, then a 5 kavim, but it's spread out a 4 kavim, then it's still considered to be a valid sale. Not true. It's 4 kavim, but it has to be swallowed up in most of the field. See, let's say you have 2.2% of little crevices, but if it's concentrated in one area, like Ukva Bar Chama said, then perhaps it's considered a separate field. It's not part of the original sale. Only if it's spread out all over the field, these tiny crevices, and most of the field it has these tiny crevices, but it's spread out. So if you add them up and they don't produce 4 kavim, then it's a valid sale. Boy, Reb Chia bar Abba, Reb Chia bar Abba said, Ruba b'miuta, miuta b'riba mahut teku. That's another question. Question is, okay, you have 4 kavim, which is spread out throughout the fields, right? So which is basically 16 quarter kavim. And therefore, according to Rabbi Yochanan, they have to be spread upon 16 kavim of a field, because most of the 16 saw. So you have a quarter of a kav per saw, because you have 30 saw in that field. And Rabbi Yochanan said that it has to be spread amongst the at least 16 saw. For every saw, a quarter of a kav is missing, and you can't plant there. Okay. But let's say you have rubam, you have 9 quarters of a ka in a small area, very concentrated area of 7 saw, and you have 7 quarters of a kav in an area of 9 saw. Basically, you have a lot of these. Quarter of a kavs that you add them up, concentrated in a smaller area, according to Rabbi Yochanan. Would that be considered, according to Rabbi Yochanan, not valid to be considered as part of the original field? Perhaps it will be considered as a separate field and not included in the original sale. Or maybe, since it's spread out, technically all those 4 kavim are still spread out over 50% of the field, perhaps it is included in the original sale. So he leaves that as an unresolved question. By Rabbi Yirmiyah asked another question. We go to Amud Beis. Kisher mahu, kishura mahu, itztidin mahu, derech haklakson mahu teku. I mean, you could have all these little crevices, but if they're shaped in the area, like you see in the picture of the Rashbam, it's shaped like a circle, or shaped like in a row, or shaped like itztidin. Itztidin is like this, where you can't. It's shaped like a horn, an ox horn, or shaped like an upside down M or sideways M. Basically, you can have all these little crevices, but if they're blocking you from plowing the rest of the field, maybe the sale is invalid. So the Gemara says, we'll leave that as unresolved. Tana, we learned to the Brisa. Even if they have a small rock, right, but it's on the outside of the field, that's not part of the original field. If it's close to the border, even if it's a little kosher, even if it's right up to the border, you have a rock by the border, is that counted as part of the field? It's also not counted in the field. Boya Rapapa asked a question. Mufsak alpha beintayim mahu teku. Okay, small rocks are counted as part of the field, right? The 5 tefach rock is counted, right? But you said if it's touching the border, it's not counted. What happens if there's a little tiny piece of dirt between the rock and the border? Would you still count the rock or not? Teku, the Gemara leaves that unresolved. Boya Ravashi, alpha milmata b'tsum milmala. Let's say you have a rock that has dirt underneath it. It's not a full rock, but the rock is on top. Or you have dirt on top and the rock is on the bottom. Technically, you could still plant there, albeit with difficulty. Is that still counted as part of the field? Or no? What makes a field if it's dirt all the way? But not if it has any part of it, it has rocky, which makes it difficult to plant there, it's not counted. The Gemara leaves that unresolved. Let's quickly do the Mishnah, and then we'll stop. Another minute. Base kur afani meichelach b'cha mida b'chevel. I'm selling you a base kur. Let's measure it out. Okay? The seller says, I'm selling you a 273 amma by 273 amma piece of field, but let's take a survey. So the Mishnah says, Pichas kalshu yanaka, haisa kalshu yakser. Let's say after taking the survey, the seller turned out that he gave less. So then he has to give a refund from the overpayment of the purchaser. Haisa kalshu, if he added a little bit, there's too much, he gave too much land. Yakser, then the purchaser has to return the land, that it was overpayment. But if he said in the sale, "Hey, I'm selling you a base core," it could be more or less a base core. Even if he added a quarter of a kav for every saw, or he was less than a quarter of a kav for every saw, or added a quarter of a kav for every saw, the sale is still valid because he says, "I'm not being precise in what I'm selling you." So presumably the seller will be moichel if he oversold, if he overgave the land, and the purchaser will be moichel if he overpaid for he got less than what he thought he's getting. But if he missed the mark by a lot, yasech cheshbon, then you have to return. The sale is invalid, and therefore mahu makser. What should the seller return? The purchaser return? Because let's say the purchaser got more land than what he paid for, so then he has to return. Does he give back land or does he give back money? So the Mishnah says mois. V'imrotza, but if the seller wants, he says, "I don't want money," machzer loikarka, then the purchaser has to give back the land. So technically, it's up to the seller what he wants back. Why did we say that you have to return money back? Because liapis koicha shel moicha, to give the power to the seller. The seller has the upper hand. He sold a property and he ended up giving more land than what he was supposed to give. Then when he gets money back, he could either request cash back or he could ask the purchaser, "Give me some property back." Shemshia besoda base tishikabe beginning base chatzikav base roiva. If you made a super mistake and you gave a big 10 kavim, 9 kavim more extra, or if you sold a garden, you gave a chatzi kav extra or a roiva kav, according to Rabbi Kiva, machzor lo karka. You have to return the land back or anything that was overpayment. Not just a little extra, because normally a little extra you're meichel, but if you gave a super amount extra, then you're not even meichel the normal little extra, and therefore you have to give a total refund. The purchaser has to give it all back, albeit he could give it money or karka, whatever the seller requests back from the sale. Okay, we'll stop over here.